Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my top 10 instanced content of Stormblood up to patch 4.15. If you missed 10 to 6, please be sure to watch that video first. The link will be in the description below. If you're here from that video and frothing at the mouth to see what's next, then boom! Without further ado, let's kick the door down to number 5.
Numéro 5.
Barely edging out X-Death for my favorite Deltascape experience would be Halicarnassus, the penultimate boss in that raid gauntlet. She loves her tea, damn it, and you're getting in the way of her leisure time. Right off the bat, what I can immediately tell you about this intimidating armored lady is that she is nothing if not varied. There is so much to learn about her that it can become a tad daunting, especially if you don't understand one core mechanic which will cause you to become reckless and mess up in other areas, even if they are easier to read or handle. In fact, that's something I notice happens quite a lot in this type of video game. Final Fantasy XIV non-exclusive, in the fact that the moment shit hits the fan, you become so frustrated and or flustered that you fail to read mechanics you're already accustomed to correctly. With that little mini rant out of the way, I feel it necessary to disclose that I gave Hallie here a perfect score in gameplay simply because there is so much to freaking do in this fight. Set in an arena that is square instead of like the other Deltascape's roundish ones, the decor is ornate and appealing to look at with huge Gothic church-styled windows. There is a very good reason for the different shape design as it directly relates to her gameplay, which function in terms of a grid-based system. Hallie's most famous attack is her panel swap, which basically places your class role on the ground, tank, DPS, or healer. Once they appear on the ground, you then have a set amount of time to stand inside of your class tile's perimeter before she attacks. If you're not standing inside of the right tile, or you're on the outside, you eat a whole lot of damage as well as grab a damage debuff. On top of that, sometimes she casts a spell that turns you into a frog while you need to do this check, and guess what? If you're a frog, you're not technically in your class, so boom! She also plays with the mechanic, forcing you at points to willingly get transformed into an amphibian so that you match the frog-faced tiles on the ground. She can also use panel swap to completely rip the tiles off the ground except for a couple, so that all that is left is pure grizzled stone, which nobody should ever stand on as she casts an attack that is basically a stalagmite erupting from the ground to impale any fools caught in the open. At some point, Hallie herself becomes parched and offers you a minigame challenge to run through as she enjoys her leisure time tea and biscuits. What happens next is you are consumed into the void that spits you out into some sandpit challenge reminiscent of Super Mario RPG's At Land's End and those tile swap games. You basically need to follow the progress of the sand and see where it diverges in an effort to get to the other dark void before a huge freaking meteor nukes the entire environment. She's even courteous enough to bestow you with buffs should you get through that sand maze quickly enough. What a dapper and classy woman! Once that intermission is done, she then doubles down on attacking you with that same panel swap mechanic, but with plenty of other smaller mechanics interspersed along the way, such as forcing the entire party to run in one direction while she targets a single person, usually a healer, with the all-in AoE, so here's hoping you're all quick enough on your toes to adjust. One of the best times I ever had in this game was doing Hallie blind and having to adjust to everything on the fly, and then finally succeeding. Halicarnassus of Deltascape V3.0 is nothing short of an adrenaline rush.
Number 4.
Rend, kill, show me your all. With those 3 sentences, my arm hair was on edge as I delivered what I believed to be the final blow to Stormblood's main antagonist. We all found out eventually that wasn't the case, but that isn't the point here. Running through the war-infested streets of Alamigo to topple the established government of the Garleans in the capital temple felt like something straight out of the main theme's namesake, that of revolution. This dungeon is essentially the culmination of everything you as a character have been working towards in the expansion of Stormblood. The liberation of Alamigo, complemented by a riveting adrenaline-pumping score that serves as pure motivation to barrel through the streets and temple halls. Alamigo is linear, but hot damn is it not cool linear. I felt so very badass as I ran through the streets dispatching the opposition, while my fellow insurgents threw bombs to destroy iron gates moored in my way, eventually culminating in a face-off against a very familiar boss from Final Fantasy VII. The scorpion fighter that appears when Cloud and Barret first infiltrate the initial reactor. It has all the same attacks. It attacks in a straight line, front and back, and does a target search in which it tries to nail the party in an AoE that is heat-seeking. Get nailed by the attack and you'll be burned, which acts very much like a poison debuff that is very much hard-hitting. Can somebody do me a favor, however, and please explain this? What in the holy blue hell is that? How does it even sustain his body weight if he for some reason needs to zip around on it? I understand exactly nothing. Once that section is completed, we infiltrate the Central Command Palace itself and run through a courtyard filled with dogs. Although not before we have to take down 2 Winstons who get all up in our grill. That's Overwatch talk for goddamn huge gorilla King Kong apes, mind you, for those who are not initiated into that wonderful world filled with blizzards. Oh, and by the way, those dogs in the courtyard? It feels so good to grab the aggro on every single last one and then have a ranged DPS drop a freaking huge range limit break all over their sorry asses. Once they've been dealt with, the Resistance hijacks one of the anti-air guns and nukes open the palace door for your band of merry men to barrel through right into the second boss. It was rather basic, except for the freaking awesome mechanic of wrenching your soul out of your body. As an ethereal body, you must then work your way back to your own body, avoiding master hands and line AoEs from the turrets around the boss area. After you manage to take down the Voodoo Master, who has friends on the other side, you have one final area left, and that is the Central Palace / Throne Room. There are pretty simple enemy pools here, but what makes it interesting are the 2 laser barriers you need to destroy in order to progress deeper into the palace, while enemies nip you in the butt with projectiles and attacks. The final guardians are 2 huge sword giants guarding the final boss, Xenos. I love this guy's boss fight quite a bit. You need to watch what color he employs into his AoE. If it's blue, get the fuck out of there, man, or welcome to the House of Pain. If it's green, you actually need to stand close to him before he's going to force push you backwards. And if you're too far back already, you fall into the damaging borders of the arena. Finally, his red AoE centers an unavoidable attack directly towards each player, so it's in your best interest to separate into the 4 cardinal points to minimize accumulated damage. Xenos will also utilize attacks that he has used in story segments of the main campaign, so you have already known what to come to expect when he employs these moves, namely with his phantom clones. At some point, he will deliver a party-wiping attack after a charge sequence that is just a flat-out DPS check against 3 swords he's thrown into the ground, which the party must eliminate while avoiding 2 different colored AoE mechanic attacks at the same time. Quick thinking is the name of the game here, and I appreciated that. All in all, I felt like Alamigo was a very fitting conclusion to the dungeons of Stormblood. I left it feeling quite satisfied.
Numéro 3.
The Drowned City of Scallops? I initially dismissed Scala as a mindless, required dungeon inclusion that each patch feels required to add to the core game. The imagery wasn't doing all that much for me upon patch note previews. Yay, yet another cavern to explore through. Yay, as if we hadn't done that enough in a whole bunch of other dungeons already included in the game. First came the heroes researching the story of a greedy monarch of a long-forgotten city obsessed with the safekeeping of his treasure, and turning victims into monsters to guard his hoard. Then came actually finding the entrance to this area in a friendly race with Alphino. And then came that amazing music box intro as the camera sweeps us through, yes, admittedly, a cavern. But damn it, that's a pretty cavern, with waterfalls amidst ruins and freaking fish eggs. I was intrigued from the moment I pushed my sprint action to round up the first mob of enemies. What I actually really enjoy about the Drowned City of Scala is that it's not actually all that long to complete, and that the monster pools just flow really well from one to the other if you know what you're doing, and you have a competent party. I can do the entirety of the first and second section before the boss in 2 pools, and the final stretch in 3. As is the case with all levels that vary their design between the boss checkpoints, Scala goes from a cavernous ruin to a derelict temple to the Cave of Freaking Wonders revealed by a hidden staircase. I once remember joking to my friends as I ran down these stairs to touch nothing but the lamp! I came to adore this final section of Scala as well for 2 reasons. The first being that upon destroying enemies in your path, You unlock a circle of runes and designs on the ground that transform you into a monster to float yourself across the chasms. Did you not notice the one monster floating across the pit as you ran down the stairs? Good bit of level design philosophy there. Never tell the player what to do, but rather, show them! The other reason is something much smaller, but that still ties into the narrative, in that for each monster you defeat, they turn back into a person and pass away, often with final words like, Mother, Father, I can finally join you now. Final Fantasy XIV as a whole has always been quite adept at incorporating small nuances and tender loving care to the completion of its lore, and this dungeon is definitely no exception. The bosses are all interesting as well, with the second one taking home the award for best boss battle here. Your first adversary is Kelpie, a horse with fins that is quite pretty to look at. Nothing too crazy with this one. He has a mechanic where he will try to pull or push you into the level boundaries that damage and also debuff your character, while also doing a tank buster and raid-wide AoE damage occasionally. Fun fact about this guy, on the original release of the patch, the push-pull was actually switched, probably by mistake, so if you would use the push move, you would get pulled. I thought it was clever, but apparently the localization team shot themselves once they realized their blunder. The second boss is easy and fun. He will start off with the basics such as trying to hit the party with AoEs and a DPS check with ads that spawn around the arena, but then boom, out of nowhere, he'll frickin' turn you all into monsters, spriggans. And the only way to get out of this is to bomb the holy hell out of his apparatus minions. It was a very pleasant and welcome surprise the first time it happened to me, and whenever I, explain this fight to people, I try not to mention that mechanic, just to see how they react. It's kinda cool. The area's final encounter starts off with a cutscene to an interesting picture on the wall before facing you off against a very tall, very huge, very pissed off chimera. Who this person is may not be exactly clear, but one could assume it's that mad obsessive king from the past Alphino mentioned. Will he make an appearance in the future? Who knows? It'd certainly be neat, that's for sure. This guy's fight plays out in what can only be described as an episode of Will It Blend? The Herodric Poison Tongue Chimera has a forward and backward cleave as accentuated by what is disclosed by the game, whether he is raising his claws or his tail. Basically, don't stand in front or in back of him when that happens. On top of that, he has a look away mechanic, and then he begins to mix and match different AoEs together, forcing the party to think on the spot for optimal placement in order to minimize damage. In my experience, I always found that while this boss is easy to read, he often proves quite daunting to overcome. In fact, I felt that Scala was just in general more difficult than the other current expert dungeons, in that the enemies all seem to have much more HP and hit that much harder. However, I don't file this as a complaint, just merely an observation. I really enjoyed Scala as a dungeon.
Numero 2.
I mean, you all knew this one was going to score super high on the list, so don't even try to hide it. Rabanastre is nothing short of one of the best raids ever designed for this title, and the fact that it is actually a 24-man raid only accentuates how grandiose the entire endeavor of coming to Rabanastre actually is, with the revelation that Ivalice is actually a part of the Final Fantasy XIV world and mythos. Everything seen in this instance is designed directly to appeal to the fanboy of Ivalice everywhere, right down to Final Fantasy XII and Final Fantasy Tactics, although to be bluntly honest, I have not played enough of Vagrant Story to know if it leaves a mark in any meaningful way, fashion or form here, so please don't hold me to that. Perhaps my favorite thing about this raid is that the music is straight out of the games that portray Ivalice, down to the victory fanfare at the end of the raid. And what a grand little surprise that was. The design is great! Not only are the areas you visit greatly varied in between phases, but the fact that each raid group gets to experience something slightly different is amazing. I have to admit that Alliance Group B gets the trophy here though, just the fact that they get to swim, while ultimately minute in the grand scheme of things, is still leagues cooler than simply running to the end of a sewer runway and waiting for the next passage to open up. Right off the bat, if you are in cohesion as 3 different raid groups, this level is going to decimate your party time after time after time again. In fact, such is the case for practically all the raids in Final. If all 3 of your groups generally aren't on point, then welcome to the wiping city of salt. I digress as I joke, but it's a mechanic that I have truly come to appreciate. You can be carried through this raid, especially these days now that many are experienced and can adjust to situations on the fly, and that eye level 340 doesn't hurt either. But it was much more difficult in the first and second week when nobody had any bloody idea what the hell was going on. Rabanastre was easily one of the hardest raids I had to learn blind, and while I relished the difficulty, I did not, however, relish bashing my head against the wall as others did not listen or did not even try to learn. You gotta adapt if you're gonna get anywhere, man. Just standing in that pretty AoE marker is only gonna frickin' get you killed and wipe the group in the long run, Dragoon. Is this a good time to say that this raid earns bonus points for showing us Ramza and Bagamnin and other tactics characters? It isn't? Well, screw you, it's on my list. That was awesome! The level opens up at the city gates where you are immediately assaulted by one of the raid's 4, you heard me right, 4 bosses, that of Mateus the Corrupt. Not only does he look mega intimidating, but he turns the entire world around him dark, foreboding, and icy. Attacks he has that stand out involve creating a gigantic ice swirl that an ice elf he summons skates around, setting off any water bubbles the group does not destroy along the way. If the group ignores too many of these destructible objects, all manners of debauchery can happen, such as needless raid-wide damage and a bunch of people being turned into immobile snowmen all at once. Once you've cleared that, he has another interesting mechanic where the entire fighting area is submerged underwater and you need to kill these frog additional monsters that create air bubbles for you to breathe when they die. If you don't get into the air bubbles to regain your composure, then you slowly get stacks of water that will straight up drown you once you hit 10. He also has the basic raid mechanic where 3 major mini-bosses spawn, and you need to keep them separated while you wear them down, otherwise you take needless damage. Mateus is a neat boss for the concept he brings, namely that of the fear of drowning and the ice elemental, but I otherwise found he was not the most difficult. No, that dubious honor goes to Hashmal, who I will be covering in just a moment. Once you've taken out Mateus, you must take out some Sikhs who are thieving the place, and I was happy to see them used again after the world of Evilis had been left untouched for so long. During this skirmish of additional monsters, a random red chocobo will enter the fray and lob a bomb somewhere that you almost run away from. To this day, I have never not seen it claim at least one victim. It's fair though, since there's so much VFX going on at any given time that it's difficult to discern any tales worth reading while all this chaos is happening. I myself had no idea about that bomb prior to somebody yelling out the warning in Alliance chat. Once you've managed to calm down the thieving rabble, you are then confronted by the bringer of order himself, and let me tell you, this is what separates the children from the adults in this raid. Welcome to Hashmal! Officially the most difficult boss encounter in all of Rabanastre, and perhaps even the game itself if you count the fact that you are basically 24 people trying to survive against the destroyer of frickin' worlds here. He has so very many one-hit death mechanics, it's a little insane, and your group needs to be ready to go to bat, otherwise you just ran into a brick wall on your leisure tour through the royal city. He has a freaking attack where he raises towers out of the ground, slices through them with his arms, and if you're standing where they fall, guess what? Instant death. Over, and over, and over again. Luckily, it's not so difficult that you can't tell where they're going to fall, but if you get even a little bit distracted by anything, then that's pretty much it. I have never seen raid groups wipe so quickly to somebody, except perhaps Ozma, and even then there is room for debate. He will then either summon a floating pillar that he either slams into the ground, causing raid-wide damage where you basically need to run as far away as possible, or he'll go to either the east or west side of the entire arena and one of his arms will be glowing orangey red. You need to run like mad, and there's a serial murder behind you so that you don't get caught on the side of the glowing arm where he rushes forward across the entire level, because not only will you suffer damage, but you will also get a severe burn debuff that does damage over time that will kill you if you aren't a tank or maybe a healer constantly only healing yourself to live through it. At some point he will summon a huge Jenga-like tower in the center that you need to whittle down to be able to incur damage on him once again, although during this phase he will also summon sand spheres that each group will need to handle on their own. If you fail the DPS check before the sphere's timer goes off, then it explodes and deals huge area-wide damage, most probably wiping the other teams. There was a lot of salt when dealing with this guy, let me tell you, as even 2 or 3 incorrectly placed people will cause severe issues for the entire raid run. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've ground to a dead halt when trying to clear this raid level at Hashmal. He is just that intense. On the bright side, however, is that if you manage to best Hashmal, then you're probably golden to get through the rest of the raid without any problems whatsoever. Your reward for defeating one of the most difficult bosses in the game is another band of Sikh thieves who summon their pets on death, a chimera and its friends. Nothing too crazy there. However, after that you find a gigantic gaping hole that you tumble into. That throws you directly into the Garam Scythe waterway, and I was marking out hard here when I realized where we were. It's really cool that each team goes their own way for about 5 minutes, but Alliance Group B gets the best path, as they must open up a switch and then swim through the sewage utilizing one of Stormblood's new mechanics, that of swimming, before resurfacing and proceeding onward deeper and deeper into the cavernous ruins. You are then faced with the Rolling Death Motorcycle of Death, Rofakale. He's pretty easy, honestly, and not that difficult, but I did want to point out some of his mechanics that I was a fan of. He brings back the Cloud of Darkness's mechanic of being shut in with your group in a force field as you batter down the monster stuck inside of there with you. But Rofakale himself will be spinning in a circle around the arena as this goes down, and he runs roughshod right through those barriers, meaning he can, and he will, run right into you depending on your placement inside of those barriers. Another mechanic I found very cool was that he would completely vanish and cloud the entire arena in pure darkness, with only these small light circles that appear everywhere across the battle arena. You're supposed to interact with them to put them out, but I've taken a lot of damage / wiped at this section because people would just run and stand inside of them instead of dispelling them altogether. Aside from that, he's like all the other bosses you've encountered throughout the game thus far, with heavy tank busters, hidden trap mine AoEs that he plants that make you stuck in a place as he prepares to damage the hell out of you, and a lock-on target charge that he then usually does a 180 turn and then targets the entirety of whatever direction he'll be facing. I've seen people run so far away when targeted that Rofakale basically has targeted 95% of the map, damaging everybody, everything, and their mother-in-laws. The final encounter of Rabanastre is none other than a homage to the character in Final Fantasy Tactics, Argoth Thadolphus. Except here in Final Fantasy XIV, he's pretty much 25 feet tall and is quite capable of messing up your entire party should you look at him funny the wrong way. First off, touching the boundaries of the level will turn you into a zombie, where you attack your own party for a set amount of time, then for lack of a better word, implode and die. So maybe don't let that happen? He has a mechanic where he loves to scream that he is Revelation, and depending on what image flashes in front of you on your screen, either an angel or a demon, you must either do what is commanded of you or disobey it directly. Failing to do so depending on what image you received will grant you a debuff. 3 stacks of said debuff, and you turn into a chicken, who usually beelines straight from the zombie transformation goop. The commands range from simple stuff like turn away to run around and don't stop, and this is usually the mechanic that messes quite a lot of people up. Aside from that, he has a couple of DPS checks and a tank buster or two. He's not the most difficult enemy, but his presentation more than makes up for his challenge. I've really enjoyed his attack that forces you to move only in a single direction of the rotating finger above your head. Once you try to move, you are locked in whatever direction that finger is currently pointing at. It's done twice, the first time being made to introduce you to the mechanic and get you ready for the second version, where he will encase the entire arena in an AoE with only a small circular radius in some corner for you to try to get to in time for safety. It's a great test of timing and skill, and with practice, you can easily perfect it. If there's anything I can say about the final encounter, is that it truly keeps you on your toes. Rabanastre is a very promising raid on the return to Ivalice, and if the previous 24-man raids have shown any indication, it's that we will be coming back here at least 2 more times, and boy, I cannot wait to mess up some banga.
Number R.
This is it. This is my #1 favorite piece of current content in Stormblood. The culmination of everything you've been fighting against. You've liberated Alamigo, or rather, you thought you did, but Xenos has one last ace in the hole, that of an unfettered and infinitely more powerful than Nidhogg, Primal, born from the remaining power in his 2 eyes that Estinian so carelessly tossed over the crevasse back at the end of Evan's Ward. Also, why would you do that? I hurled myself against this guy for hours the first time I got to him. No one was gonna carry me. I couldn't even carry others through this guy, although that's not to say I didn't try. With every attempt, we succeeded just a little farther. With every attempt, we managed to stay alive a tad bit longer as we brought his health percentage lower. With every attempt, we would show Shinryu that we would never give up, not until his damn head was taxidermied on the wall of my study, I swear to God. Even now, in trials, when Shinryu pings, I get goosebumps and steel myself for a long fight. It's hard to put into words the feeling this guy gave on Stormblood's release, as at the very least, item level and materia has helped to mitigate this guy's difficulty somewhat, especially now that it's been a while and people are acquainted with him. But like the Steps of Faith's Vishap and the final Steps of Faith's Nidhogg before him, Shinryu was a stopgap roadblock brick wall of pure cement and unfettered, total hatred toward you and yours. I'll never forget the collective sigh of relief that I felt the first time my guild and I managed to best him, my heart pounding in my chest, and my fallen comrades all around me as they were raised desperately, only to fall again to his many attacks and mechanics. And what an ode to the entirety of Final Fantasy XIV his mechanics are. This guy feels like the true test of graduation to the game. Shinryu will test your knowledge of everything you've learned up to this point, while at the same time going ahead and introducing completely brand new mechanics. What the hell is this tidal wave doing here? Well, I just flew off the level. Sorry guys. What the hell is this green marker? Oh, that's where his bloody tail is gonna hit? How the hell was I supposed to know that? Shinryu is the epitome of every single classic primal you've faced, from Garuda, to Titan, to Shiva, to Ifrit, to Leviathan, and he utilizes every single one of their attacks to great effect in a new way that you have to keep in mind as you survive his onslaught of heavy-hitting auto attacks and AoEs as well. The fight has 3 phases, with the first being the easiest. You're high above the air and must not fall off as you avoid his many attacks. There's a tank buster called Ak Morn, where the 2 tanks must be in close proximity to absorb damage together. AoEs that hit in alternating stripes across the playing field, randomly interspersed AoEs to make your ranged DPS move around, a whirlpool that shoots you completely across the level so you fall off of it if you're not near it, an eruption that does full damage if you're not standing in a water puddle, a lightning judgment bolt that does full damage if you are standing in a water puddle, and an earth attack that can take up the entire playing field if the 2 targets aren't moving together in unison. Focus target is your friend, people. Oh, and by the way, that was just phase 1. Phase 2 starts with him flying away and you having to deal with dragon adds, as well as 3 volleys of proximity AoEs. Placement is key here. Stand in the wrong place at the wrong time and it's a wipe. This is also a DPS check. Take too long clearing out the rabble and avoiding getting killed and you're basically going to wipe and have to start all over as well. There are no checkpoints. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. After this section you are bounded and enter active time maneuver mode, which is basically mash every key on your keyboard or controller to not die as fast as you can as Shinryu destroys the platform that you're standing on, and you fall to the second, larger arena, entering the 3rd and final phase. This is where the shit both gets real and hits the fan. Your group now does very minimal damage to Shinryu at this point. You must goad him into slamming his tail onto the arena, wherein you then deal massive damage to him by then attacking his tail, causing upwards of 390k damage. He retains all his attacks from the first stage, but has a couple of new ones you need to watch out for, including a gigantic dive bomb that encases like 97% of the level or so, and you must basically make a beeline to the extreme edges of the level to not die or fall off, depending on the damage done to the level. Yes, I said damage done to the level. The level itself can be broken by excessive abuse from Shinryu's tail. If you keep slamming it into the arena, it will begin to get wear and tear and eventually begin to fall apart, making maneuvering between his different attacks more difficult than they need to be. I'm in love with this fight because even though it's a literal hell on earth to run through, it begets a hell of a magical feeling once it all comes together. And that music, that wonderful, wonderful, epic music pumping you up as you go, it's a pure adrenaline rush. If you best Shinryu, it's because you are a hell of a Final Fantasy XIV player, and you should feel great. And you should go around and high-five everyone in your guild and in your party, and you should buy little Timmy some turkey for Christmas, and you should donate to the poor, and you should let love into your hearts. Unless you were carried through the fight, then you should just go back to the cesspool pits of the Novice Network from whence you came, you foul demon! Get good! Get better! Get the fuck out of here! And there you have it. I hope that all of you enjoyed the list as much as I had fun making it. It was a hell of an undertaking, let me tell you. 10,000 words on 19 pages for a script, plenty of audio balancing from my pal Brandon over there, and many hours of video editing. This was my very first top 10 list, and I wanted it to be special. I hope it felt great and comprehensive, and that you enjoyed it. You don't have to agree with it, and that's fine, but all I ask is at the very least you respect it and remember that this list was subjective. It's my opinion. That being said, I'm open to all manner of discussion and commentary and criticism on how you guys enjoyed this list. If you want to see a patch-by-patch revision of this list, please let me know. If not, then I'll only really update the list when I feel it's appropriate, or when there have been some major changes. You can also find the entire script I used for this video over on my Tumblr page, should you want to read the list as opposed to listening to me speak it. Final Fantasy XIV is easily one of my favorite games ever made, and I'd like to continue making top 10s for it, so please let me know the kind of top 10s that you may want to see for it. Until then, thank you for the watch, I hope you enjoyed this list, and I'll catch you guys next time.